The first January 6th protester has been acquitted on all counts in a humiliating defeat for the Justice Department. In this video, we're going to take a look at the verdict. We're going to see how it applies to a number of January 6th trials yet to come. And stick with me to the very end of this video when I'll reveal what this acquittal really means for January 6th and the future of the GOP. You are not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Stevie with you. Great to be with you. As always, I am your daily fake news antidote. So come on into your Patriot Professor's Den, where I help you to think better so you can feel better in these crazy and turbulent times. So if you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe. Before we begin, I want to introduce you to an amazing organization called Patriot Switch. You know, we often talk about building parallel structures and businesses and institutions to emancipate ourselves from all the woke corporations like Disney that are out there. Well, Patriot Switch has helped over 2 million patriots all across the country make sure that all their purchases go to support patriotic companies. Isn't that awesome? And the coolest thing here is that you don't even have to change anything outside your ordinary routine or the items you already purchase. Patriot Switch will show you exactly how you can start voting with your dollars to support companies that promote our values of faith, family, and freedom. So make sure to learn more by visiting Patriot Switch in the description below. All right, gang, let's dive right in here. We got our very first acquittal among the January 6th protesters in what's nothing less than a humiliating defeat for the Justice Department. A federal judge who is himself a Trump appointee to the bench, he found Matthew Martin of Santa Fe, New Mexico, not guilty on all counts. He was acquitted on each of the 4 misdemeanor accounts of trespassing and disorderly conduct. Martin was arrested a year ago and charged with entering and remaining in a restricted building. He was charged with disorderly conduct in a restricted building, violent entry, and parading in the Capitol building. Taking the stand in his own defense, Martin testified that he was indeed, quote, waved into the building by Capitol Police. Now, you may not know this, but it was confirmed during the trial that that is exactly what happened. An official for U.S. Capitol Police did indeed testify that police were, quote, so vastly outnumbered and couldn't stop people, and all they could do was observe and try to make sure no one got hurt. And so for some reason, police thought waving people into the Capitol building would contribute to that. Isn't that interesting? This whole January 6th episode, frankly, it's getting more and more interesting by the day, or by the trial, as it were. And of course, based on this testimony as well as surveillance video, the judge in this case agreed that the defendant proved that he was indeed waved in, invited into the building by police officials. And so obviously, this defeat was a stunning humiliation for the Justice Department that is increasingly being faced with indisputable evidence that there was far more to the situation than just protesters getting out of hand. In fact, a number of the trials scheduled for the upcoming weeks and months are for defendants charged with the very same things as Martin, which may mean that we're looking at just the beginning of the DOJ's acquittal humiliation. At the very least, it's being determined that the riot in the Capitol building was at least in some ways a self-inflicted wound. And of course, Dr. Carlson has been arguing that there is significant evidence that intelligence officials helped to stage the riot, a claim that the left-wing media has unilaterally and unanimously dismissed, which of course is no surprise. But interestingly, the legacy media has yet to contend with the recently released bombshell hidden camera footage of Matthew Rosenberg, who's the national security correspondent for the New York Times, who admitted to Veritas's hidden camera that there were, quote, tons of FBI informants among the people who attacked the Capitol. Now, that observation is rather fascinating, to say the least, because when you scour the New York Times coverage of January 6th, they don't seem to take too kindly to that notion that there were FBI informants on the Capitol grounds. For example, look at this headline. A January 6th panel seeks to debunk unfounded theory about FBI role in riot. Or this one, no, there's no evidence that the FBI organized a Capitol riot. Now, that appears to be nothing less than par for the course when it comes to the New York Times. Their reporters say one thing in private, all the while reporting its exact opposite to the public on the other. So, for example, Rosenberg privately ranted about the fact that the media's obsession with the January 6th event was utterly ridiculous. It was totally over the top. And he said he was absolutely over the establishment narrative that this was the single worst attack on America since 9/11, all that kind of hyperbole. And Rosenberg admitted that the New York Times coverage of the January 6th riots has simply not been accurate. It's not been reliable, and they've consistently published a false narrative to their readers. And yet that didn't stop Rosenberg from writing an article, I kid you not, debunking the so-called big lie that January 6th was no big deal and that its significance was largely a fabrication of the left. Even though in private he said precisely those two things. It was not that big of a deal, and the left most certainly has overblown its significance. How ironic that the article he wrote is entitled "The Next Big Lies." So, if at the very least, if it's becoming increasingly apparent that January 6th was not what the media is saying it was, if there was at least some culpability among the Capitol Hill police for what happened, which is the basis for this latest acquittal and the promise of a number of others to follow, then what really is going on here? What's the real significance of this acquittal and those that are most likely to follow? Well, first, what do you think of my cool shirt here, huh? I'll be back. You can get one of your own. It's one of our most popular ones just by visiting our merch store, by clicking on that link below. Our merch store is the single best way that you can support this channel and my reporting, as well as spread Patriot spirit far and wide. So make sure to click on that link below or go to store.turleytalks.com. That's store.turleytalks.com. All right, so what's the significance of the acquittal and the ones that promise to come? What are their significance for the Patriot movement as a whole? Well, we talked about this on other videos, but ironically, far-left outlets like Salon.com, they actually understand what's really happening here, which is, to the horror of the legacy media, January 6th in many ways was a success. The left sees exactly what's happening. January 6th actually encapsulated for many the escalating face-off between the people versus the permanent political class. This is why I think the polls were so supportive of Trump after January 6th. For many patriots, January 6th embodied a struggle, a radically frustrating struggle between the concerns of the people and the obtuse deafness of the permanent political class as embodied by the Capitol building, architecturally, right? The fact that Trump called for peace, he clearly called for the protests to be peaceful before they went to the Capitol building, and then he called for peace after the riots broke out. The very fact that he called for peace while at the same time never backing down from his original claims about the election in November seems to have permanently enshrined Trump as the bona fide champion of the people. Someone who will faithfully fight on behalf of patriots and who simply will never, ever back down. In that sense, January 6th was a success. It secured Trump's takeover of the GOP. This is why the polls that came out shortly after January 6th found that the vast majority of Republicans still overwhelmingly supported Trump. And this takeover of the GOP, by virtue of the fact that Trump was seen as the true defender of patriots, it's been formalized by Trump's massive war chest, where he's amassed over $100 million with his Save America PAC. And his leadership over the GOP it's even given him, CNN is calling it a shadow presidency, where GOP leaders at statewide levels are doing his bidding in securing election integrity in their respective states for the upcoming midterms and for 2024. And this is what the left is freaking out about today. Leftists are recognizing that January 6th permanently enshrined Trump's leadership over the GOP, and that leadership is now directing itself towards securing electoral victories at the midterms and in the next presidential election. And so this is why they're so freaked out. They really honestly believe that Trump has launched successfully, he's successfully orchestrated a coup, as it were, over the GOP, and now he's going to orchestrate a successful coup over Congress and the White House. And with the first acquittal among January 6th defendants and the promise of more to come, the patriot grassroots will be even more energized than ever before to once and for all take over Washington.